Hello, and welcome. This is Heavy Hands. I'm Connor Rebush. That's Phil McKenzie. Phil, I'm having a hard time getting it out today, clearly. Help me, please, I beg of you. How are you?
I'm not too bad.
You're never too bad.
Looking at the next UFC on ESPN card that we're going to be breaking down, and
It is too bad. Is that what you're saying?
It ain't good. Sometimes you get cards which are almost good.
Yeah.
I would describe this as almost good.
Yeah, I gave you the almost good line before. It seems tantalizingly close, but it's less tantalizing the more you look at it. That's okay. It's alright, Phil. You know, don't be downhearted, friend, because we only have to talk about 2 of these fights, really. And, if, like last week's card is any lesson to us, Dana White is right. The cards that you don't care about are always the most entertaining, and we should shut up. Because last week's card was very entertaining. And, even the fights that looked really bad beforehand ended up being very entertaining. So who knows, Phil? What do we know?
I'd say the problem with last week's card was not necessarily the fights which were booked on it were bad.
True. They were all
But
pretty
more,
well matched.
there was just so much of it.
Yeah, you're right. They were all pretty well matched. These I'm not so completely sure about. But certainly there are at least 2 fights we find compelling, and one we may mention in passing. Robert Whittaker versus Kelvin Gastelum. It's the main event for a reason. It means something. It's interesting. We continue the story of Robert Whittaker. You know what I forgot? I was going to make our listeners listen to me sing a Neil Young parody, Phil. I was going to I was going to do Hey Hey My and something with this is the story of Bobby Knuckles, but I didn't do it, and everyone's sad.
We are all the poorer for that.
You're despondent, I can tell. But you know, that's my interest here. We're continuing the story of Robert Knuckles, Bobby Whittaker, and tracking his path back to the title or not. I do find that very compelling on an intellectual level, and fight-wise, I love watching Robert Whittaker fight. So I am excited about this. I think Kelvin Gastelum is an interesting test. Also, I'm kind of curious to see where Gastelum is at this point in his career and how he will continue to progress if he does. We've also got Ricardo Ramos fighting Bill Algeo Sterling. That one should be fun. And I think we might talk about Stevens Close, which is technically the co-main event, before moving on to recapping last week's card, which, as I said, really was full of satisfying violence. And in fact, some of it not satisfying. There were some moments of just shocking brutality sort of sprinkled throughout this card. Nonetheless, kept the interest pretty much the whole way through until, weirdly, the last 2 fights were kind of the worst fights. So we'll talk about that. But first, Whittaker, Gastelum. What do you think of Bobby Knuckles, Phil? What's your estimation of where he is at right now as a fighter? Where is he at in his arc?
I think, to be honest, he's probably still pretty much at his peak. I think we haven't, in retrospect, I think we've probably seen that the Adesanya fight was just struggles with a tough style matchup. Mm-hmm. And, you know, probably trying to turn it into a war when he shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I think we're pretty much looking at a Robert Whittaker who is at the same kind of standard that he was when he won the middleweight title. I think the one thing I will say is that I think since that fight we have seen lower pace from him. I didn't think like the Cannonier fight in particular, I thought was very cautious in a sort of broadly similar dynamic to the Yoel Romero fight. He was fighting someone who was massive and sort of just a golem of strength and durability. Mm-hmm. And he didn't like rack up quite the same volume as he did. He just he just won. I don't know whether that's like him deciding to have more of a technical approach or maturity, or whether it's simply that he doesn't want to pull the trigger that much. He doesn't want to get into wars. But that kind of adaptation is one that I suspect isn't really going to play a factor in this particular matchup, because I think whether he wants, and spoiler warning, I guess, whether he wants to play a outside fencing game or he wants to like pour it on Gastelum a bit, I think both of those approaches win him this fight.
Yeah, that I guess that is the spoiler to just get out of the way, right? It does seem like a pretty good matchup for Bobby Knuckles. So according to Fight Metric, just to corroborate and or refute your statement, he threw 158 significant or total strikes against Jared Cannonier. I think
actually more than I remembered, got to be honest.
Yeah, it does feel kind of slow paced. I think a lot of that was the kicks. Robert Whittaker has always, he's not like weak to a low kicking heavy attack, but it does force him to go into tactical big brain mode. The pace of the Cannonier fight reminded me very much of the pace of, say, the Hafel and the Tall fight.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Another guy who was like going southpaw and kicking his leg, switching stances and kicking his legs. And that just forced Whittaker to play with his position more, to rely more on feints and timing. And I think he was just very fixated on there was like a fine line in that fight where Cannonier was taking his jab away, or at least that was his intent, with the low kicks, and Whittaker in turn was trying to take away the low kicks with his jab. So I think a lot of that fight was just spent trying to walk that fine line of punishing Cannonier with the weapon that he was trying to punish him for using. Right? Very tactical.
Yep.
Complicated sort of thing to consider. And again, I think we saw that against Natal. I think we saw a bit of the same thing in the Hall fight. So I think it ended up being kind of a style matchup thing as well. In terms of Cannonier's power, I didn't think he seemed all that intimidated by it. He kind of just kept Cannonier at bay. And I think that's the real thing that we had emphasized over this 3-fight run, is that there's a certain style Whittaker struggles with. And then there are styles that make him work, but the defining line is really just footwork. If you have bad footwork, Robert Whittaker will chew you up. If it takes a long route to get there because he's worried about your kicks or not, he is still going to work his way into kicking you in the face and jabbing you several dozen times at least. And J.R. Cannonier is like a big plotter with bad footwork, and Whittaker ran circles around him, which I guess poses the question, how's Kelvin Gastelum's footwork?
Not great.
Not great.
So I think, so we're trying to think of parallels, right? And before we started recording.
Yeah. And
the thing I was thinking about this fight is that this is going to be a very bouncy fight. The two of these guys are bouncers and leapers. They sort of, go up and down with the balls of their feet and then cover distance in a single burst. Like with Whittaker, it's that sort of jolting up jab he was using against Cannonier, or he comes in with like his front kicks or the stomp. Or, sometimes he will load for that, sometimes horrific right hand.
Mm-hmm.
But he is a karate guy. He is one of the archetypal karate boxers in MMA. And Gastelum, as we've mentioned on many occasions, we labeled Whittaker is specifically, someone who struggled with lateral movement. Same is true of Gastelum, because I think in the same way, he is someone who lines the opponent up and then springs in.
Yeah. Straight line attacks.
Yeah. So, what has happened in mutual bouncy fights, against Darren Till, who is also, in his own way,
mm-hmm.
someone who will just hop in and out of range, who's mostly a lot more of a like trying to push you out of position just for the left hand kind of thing, but still is very much a in and out fighter. So, I mean, on the broad MMA math thing, Whittaker won a reasonably close decision until just won very, very easily. But more than that, it's how inert Gastelum looked when he was up against someone who was controlling space, and he wasn't sure of how to blitz in. I think the basic problem is that if we subdivide like the issues with footwork into the real basics of in and out and side to side, Gastelum struggles very badly with both.
Yeah.
I think Whittaker struggles less with either one of those things. I mean, he really didn't get anything done against Till. And it was one of those fights where, so I mean, I guess that's the other question. Where do you think Kelvin Gastelum is at? Because we've often called out that he doesn't really improve from fight to fight, and whether his performance against Heinisch is an improvement or not is sort of up for debate. But where do you think he is right now?
It was a change. I mean, I'll give him that. This is a man who has not only, arguably he has improved more than he has ever changed at all over the course of his MMA career, if that makes sense. He got slightly sharper. He had moments against Adesanya, but it was all pretty much Kelvin Gastelum shit. So it was different. It was the most wrestling heavy approach we've ever seen out of Gastelum in terms of pressing that as an offensive weapon. And, I liked it at the time. I think more than I kind of do now. I thought, there's good timing here. We see Gastelum actually like driving through. We saw some chain wrestling out of him. I really liked that. That's obviously going to be important for him as like this little middleweight who tends to beat people into scrambles if he does outgrapple them. And now I look back at it and I'm not sure about that performance. One thing is that a lot of Gastelum's success in chain wrestling seemed to simply be because Ian Heinisch did not have a good answer to a body lock or a rear waist cinch.
Because he actually picked up a ton of body locks on Darren Till, who, to his credit, just stripped them off and went back to outstriking him.
Right, because that's what you have to do. You have to fight the hands, or smash the head down or something. This will be a theme of this episode, by the way. I think it's just like basic first line wrestling defense. Since we'll have a chance to talk about that with Kevin Holland and Marvin Vittori later. So yeah, Heinisch just didn't, and we know that about Heinisch, that his wrestling game sort of concedes the initial exchange a lot. And that frequently people lose to him because they just keep smashing themselves into him, finding a certain success, and then it becoming like fruitless or it leading to an exhausting scramble, right? He's a war fighter, not a battle fighter, Ian Heinisch. And, Kelvin Gastelum was just able to keep winning those battles consistently, and he won the right battle enough times that he won the fight. It was still very close, particularly on the feet. Concerningly so. And this is the other thing that I want to ask you. Has Kelvin Gastelum gotten slower? Because he used to be renowned for having some of the fastest hands in the sport. Has he gotten slower?
Or is he just fighting people who are not ready for the nursing home?
Ooh, that is also a very important question. Yes. Although that again, the Adesanya performance still stands out as one where he was particularly well prepared. He was taking it really seriously, obviously. And his speed showed up in that fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm willing to say that maybe he is slowing down a bit.
Yeah. So the real thing overall is that I just don't think Gastelum is so incredibly hittable. He often tends to succeed because he's a southpaw who actually throws 1-2s instead of just 2s. and people are surprised by that. But Robert Whittaker, unfortunately for Kelvin, has fought a lot of southpaws. A lot. Like more than I even realized before I looked at it. He's fought. Adesanya is frequently a southpaw. Till, of course. Cannonier repeatedly went southpaw in their fight. More committed, we have Yoel Romero, Derek Brunson, Rafael Natal is a stance switcher. There's a shitload of southpaws on here. And we've had so much occasion lately, Phil, to wonder, sort of like meekly, like, is this fighter gonna use his jab? Is he gonna do all the stuff that normally works? Or is he gonna not do it just because the other guy is a southpaw? And, Robert Whittaker does all the stuff that works against southpaws. So he's gonna jab Kelvin Gastelum's face off. That's kind of my initial read. That was my initial read coming in, and I'm sticking to it, because whether or not, Gastelum's changes represent an improvement is kind of irrelevant to me. Cause, I don't think improving in the area of wrestling is the best way to get to Robert Whittaker, who out-wrestled
it's in many ways the absolute worst improvement you could make, because he's one of the most bulletproof defensive wrestlers that we've seen in MMA. It's like if someone built, improved their wrestling before they had a rematch with Jose Aldo. You'd just be like, why?
Yeah.
This is,
If
just isn't going to get you anywhere.
If after their first meeting, Chad Mendes had come into the rematch trying to wrestle harder, you know what I mean? Like, he literally out-wrestled you last time so cleanly. And Whittaker, again, this is my vague connection to Kevin Holland, but like, he's such a good wrestler that, he almost doesn't even have to think about it. And that's the real thing, because if Gastelum's wrestling was going to pose a problem for Whittaker, you would think it would be in using that vaunted hand speed in combination with the threat of the takedown to make something happen, to keep some pressure on Whittaker, make him uncomfortable and touch his chin. But, very much unlike Kevin Holland, like, you know how I'll sometimes say, Phil, that somebody, like, the answer to this is not to change this about their striking game or that or whatever, but simply to get better at wrestling. That's Robert Whittaker. He got good at wrestling. He does the right things. He can be fully in striking mode, and when he feels the opponent collide with his hips, there are instantaneous, correct technical reactions. He will immediately be fighting the hands. He will immediately be looking to control an arm if he can, or take a wrist. He will immediately be stuffing the head and breaking posture. He will immediately be moving his feet, creating an angle. Everything happens instantaneously, and so it frees him to actually focus on what he's doing on the feet, in free movement. And that just frankly seems like a bad thing for a Gastelum who has apparently invested more than anything else in his wrestling.
Yeah, it does. It seems like a pretty rough matchup. Like, Gastelum's, I mean, he's never knocked out anyone, really, who isn't pretty old. Yes. I think Whittaker is still very durable, as we've seen. Gastelum has kind of freakish cardio. Again, Whittaker doesn't really get that tired. Well, he does, but he fights through it.
Yep.
He's fought 5 rounds many times. I think this is just one of those ones where they're going to come in wanting to fight fairly similar fights, and Whittaker is simply better at almost every aspect. He's taller, he has a reach advantage. Probably wins everywhere apart from pure punching power, and even there, it's probably not like it's probably not a big. Yeah, I know. I'm not even sure. Yeah.
I think it feels like honestly a pretty good one for Robert Whittaker. And I like that. I felt like the Till fight was it was an echo of the Adesanya fight for him in 2 different ways. On the one hand, some of the same stylistic problems, as we've noted before, Darren Till with his career first counterpunching performance. And the reach. That's another thing, by the way, which sets Gastelum apart from other people who have troubled Whittaker. He's tiny. Let us never forget that. But the other way, it was, I think, him still working over the stress of having lost to Israel Adesanya. He was very open about that. He said, it was an incredibly nerve-wracking experience fighting Darren Till. And then against Cannonier, maybe a little lower volume, perhaps more cautious, but looking very much like the Robert Whittaker, as you said, who won the title. And I think this will be a perfect opportunity to get his confidence back. And I would still like to see him versus Adesanya in a rematch. So I hope this sets it up.
Yep.
I'm into it.
It won't.
Well, what else are they going to do? Marvin Vettori? That's a way worse rematch. That's way less compelling.
Oh, do Marvin Vettori versus Robert Whittaker whilst they're waiting for Adesanya versus Khamzat Chimaev or John Jones or something?
Oh, you're right. Well, let's not bank on future disappointments. Let's take a break instead. When we come back, we are going to talk about possibly Jeremy Stevens, Drakkar Klose. Phil is fascinated by this fight. He will not stop talking to me about it. So he insists. And then after that, Ricardo Ramos, Bill Algeo, and then Holland Vittori and all that garbage after this. It's not garbage. They were good fights.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Phil, you've been dying to talk about it. Jeremy Stevens, Drakkar Klose.
It's just weird and I don't get it.
Yeah.
It's not...
These are always the ones you want to talk about, by the way, the ones that are weird that we don't get.
Yeah. I feel like I just want to talk it out so that I can understand it. Because Drakkar Klose is just big and grinding and consistent, and up until very recently, insanely durable.
Yep.
And Jeremy Stevens is pretty good.
Yep. And is a lot of the same things and way more experienced.
He's also a lightweight.
He's at lightweight.
But we had a weird experience when we looked the two of them up, because Jeremy Stevens is taller and has a longer reach. Isn't actually that, like, he's not a skinny dude.
He is simply a bigger man than Drakkar Klose, despite the one coming up in weight. He simply is the bigger man. So,
yeah. Does that mean we have to pick Jeremy Stevens just for, like, being good?
That was
having a low kick game?
That was going to be my gut feeling coming in. I mean, how do people beat Jeremy Stevens, right? You can't go toe to toe and force a fight with Jeremy Stevens, which is what Drakkar Klose generally does. Getting in people's faces and forcing a fight. You can't do that unless you're A, way more technical than him, like Jose Aldo. B, like on a par with him in terms of finishing power, like Aldo or Calvin Kattar. And that's it. Otherwise, you got to go around. You have to circumvent the things that make Stevens dangerous. You can't stand in front of him and trade shots with him. You have to take him down.
I mean, like, you can out-wrestle him.
That's what I was going to say. You have to take him down and control him like Rodriguez and Zabit did. Or you have to outmaneuver him and just take advantage of the fact that while occasionally respectable, his footwork is frequently just bad. He's not a good cage cutter. Drakkar Klose capable of any of these things. He's certainly not a big puncher to that degree. How many knockouts does he have?
0?
4, and they're all way pre-UFC. They're literally in his first 5 fights. So, not a particularly big puncher. Not a particularly crafty or slick fighter. When Drakkar Klose does look technically impressive, it's in the clinch. And, I don't know. I just feel like Jeremy Stevens is going to win. I mean, I know he's on a losing streak, but have any of those fights been wipeouts?
Who do you think would win in a fight between Bobby Green and Drakkar Klose?
Oh, they fought. Do you mean Bobby Green and...
Yes. No, I mean Bobby Green and Drakkar Klose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you know what? If it hadn't happened, I probably would pick Bobby Green.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. He's just Klose is just very consistent. So weirdly, the fight that I find myself worrying about from the perspective of picking Stevens is Charles Oliveira, because that's a fight that Stevens really should have been able to win against, a relatively nascent version of Oliveira, still fragile. He should have been someone he could push up against the cage and bully. Instead, he just ended up getting clinched the whole time. And, that was one of the times when we realized that, Oliveira he's a genuinely really good wrestler. We just haven't been able to see it because he's been fighting like Frankie Edgar.
Yeah.
So I do worry, whether Klose can just, grind Stevens in the clinch. I'm gonna say probably not, despite the fact that Stevens is on a really sizable losing streak at the moment. Because in none of those losses has Stevens looked particularly fragile, and in none of them has he really just lost a pace war in the way that Klose tends to beat people.
Yeah,
Klose just forces them into a high grinding pace that they can't stay with, and I think honestly, this might be a bit more like the his fight with Dariush or Stevens' fight with Josh Emmett. Right. Where Klose's insistence on just having a tough fight the whole time puts him into the fire. He actually, more than he thinks he should be. He's oh, I can be here, I can trade shots, I'm incredibly durable the entire time. I'm not scared of anything. And then he gets hit by a really big puncher.
Yeah. We also don't know how Klose is going to look after having been knocked out for the first time in his career. I mean, the man really got posterized. It wasn't just a normal knockout either. He got fucked up by Beneil Dariush.
Yeah. I think it's going to be close. No pun intended.
Sure.
Like I said, that Green fight was very competitive. And Klose, he's genuinely, he's not a bad fighter.
No.
He is, he is an MMA lab product. He's just someone who is good everywhere. He's good in the interstitial spaces. He's good in the clinch. He's a decent grappler, and he's just ready for wherever the fight goes. So I think it's going to be reasonably competitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll take Jeremy Stevens just for the firepower. And I'm going to assume that firepower is still there at lightweight, which isn't really a given.
Yeah, firepower. The other thing that stands out, because I think this was a factor in the Dariush fight, is Jeremy Stevens is just tireless. One of the more underrated aspects of his fighting style. He's got that Alliance MMA cardio. They work on it a lot. And I don't know. I just I would love to see Drakkar Klose come in and stick and move and keep Jeremy Stevens at bay. There's a definite window there to force that kind of fight and make things happen and get to the clinch from angles, and set up your wrestling. That would be great. But I don't know. I think Stevens is going to force the issue if Klose doesn't do it himself, and they're going to trade. So yeah, I'll take Stevens for power and experience. All right. How about this?
Weird fight.
It is a weird fight. It is a strange one. How about this main card opener? We have Ricardo Ramos taking on Bill Algeo Main Sterling, who made his impressive UFC debut in a close loss to Ricardo Lamas. And then, what was the one after that? Oh, that's right. The Vile Spike Carlisle, sadly cut. It's like when you have a villain you love to hate and then they get killed in season 1.
Yeah.
He really was gone too soon. They should have kept him around so I could spew bile at him more frequently.
Why did they get rid of him? Why did they get rid of him anyway?
I don't know. He's like a
Can't have been for the PR.
No. Why would it be? No, he's like a psychopathic, muscly evangelical. He's like the perfect UFC fighter. And I have no idea why they cut him. Because he lost 2 in a row, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah. And Ricardo Ramos, who will be coming into this on the back of a brutal loss to Lerone Murphy.
Yeah, a really concerning loss.
Really concerning. So, I don't know. What do you make of it? I think it's an interesting fight. Bill Algeo, very exciting. Ricardo Ramos, basically, versus any equally long-limbed striker, is a very interesting prospect to me.
Yeah. I think he's one of those guys where he really likes being a long boy. I think part of that Murphy fight that was so strange was due to the fact that he was really unsure of how to traverse the distance.
Yep.
And he sort of gave up.
Saeed Nurmagomedov also beat him.
Yeah. Yeah, both of those. I mean, remember when he kept doing that crossover low kick?
Yeah.
When people were like, oh, that's an interesting, move to try and style with at the beginning. And then he did it for like the 5th time. And you just realized, oh no.
Is he aware this is not only basically completely ineffective, but making him incredibly vulnerable?
Yeah.
Apparently not.
And he just sort of gave up. So yeah, very concerning. I'm not really sure how this one plays out. I've got to be honest. I'm tempted to just pick Bill Algeo because he's just incredibly consistent and gutsy and tall. Yeah. And, you saw in that Lamas fight that he was even down in the hole, he was willing to pull it back.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, wait a minute. Sorry. That was the fight where Lamas was in the hole and then Lamas, kind of surged back, right?
They kind of both were. I mean, Algeo lost the first round, hurt Lamas in the second, and then Lamas came back.
Oh, that's the one.
Very resilient fight from both guys.
So yeah, I mean, I guess I'm willing to take him just on consistency and grit.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing about Lamas is that it also fighting him kind of is generally a good way of showing whether you are finishable.
Yeah. He's going to find it. If
you have
obvious.
A tendency to stick your head into guillotines, Ricardo Lamas will guillotine you.
Yep.
Whether you're Chucky Olives or not. And, if you're easily disposable on the feet, Ricardo Lamas will do that too.
Yep.
So yeah, in that case, I guess I just got to pick Algeo for the consistency.
It's a consistency. It's also, I think this is the best way to use reach against Ramos. It's the pressure.
Yeah.
Algeo he might be a bit of a slow build at times, and I do think the opening minutes of this fight will be very interesting. Because, for example, Ricardo Lamas, tons of success with low kicks against Bill Algeo. Ramos he might throw the stupidest low kicks on earth. I'm watching the Lerone Murphy fight, by the way. You're not kidding. He throws that stupid goddamn kick 8 times in this one round. I don't know what the hell he's doing. But, he hasn't done that in any other fights. Has he? Usually he's a good kicker.
No, I've never seen him do anything that dumb.
He was very confused. Usually he's a good kicker. He's got a nice front kick to the body. A solid low kicker as well. So I think until Algeo starts working into pressure, Ramos is going to have a period of time to really invest in a triad of weapons. But it didn't work for Ricardo Lamas, who is accurate and a powerful low kicker. Really underrated in that regard, I think. He's just going to end up getting pressured. And I don't think Ramos likes that. I think he would much rather be bullying someone. He's pretty comfortable in a 50-50 kind of fight. He doesn't have to be in complete control. Like his very well-matched fight with Kyung Ho Kong, for example. But, he does not like being pushed backwards consistently. Doesn't like being put against the fence. Doesn't like when people will, He has a tendency to watch his work, doesn't like when people will counter and then leverage that counter into forward movement. And Bill Algeo is just greedy for space. Every time Hamosh gives it up, especially increasingly as the fight goes on, he's going to eat it up. So I will take Bill Algeo as well. I think it will be an exciting fight. Hamosh is always exciting, even when it's just because he's getting smoked in spectacular fashion. He's a real live or die by the sword kind of fighter.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
Yes, I will also take Bill Algeo, I think. I'm not really going to trust Hamosh against someone unless I know that they're super finishable at this point.
Yeah.
Especially not someone with just frame parity.
Yeah, he's 25. Hamosh probably has at least one big development in his future. Or at least likely.
25,
yeah.
Man.
I know.
That is weird.
So he has time. I don't want to write him off and say he's a finished product. For the time being, he doesn't seem to have a super. He's just not consistent. He seems very experimental with his tactics. Doesn't have like a reliable way of building an attack or asserting his control over the fight. He just has a lot of good physical attributes, and he starts every fight very confident. So, it should be good. I would love to see Hamosh show something new. Again, I'm very curious, as in the previous fight with Close. I'm very curious to see what he looks like after that Leroy Murphy fight. That was a rough one.
Yeah, he's 25, but he is also 8 years into an MMA career, and often in those, maybe slightly more than that, but anyway, often in those kind of dynamics, we've seen it before with Jordan Mean and so on. You do get guys who get to the points where they are now an adult, and they're suddenly like, I don't really like this that much.
Yeah.
They kind of grow out of it in the same way someone might grow out of music or something else that they loved in their teens.
Sure.
So yeah, I will be curious to see what he looks like. But yeah, as for now, I'm not trusting him.
Yep. Still an open question. All right. Well, let's move on to, looking backward then, because, I think we can squeeze in, honestly, last week's main event here at the end of this segment, because I don't know if there was all that much to say about it. Just as, in advance, kind of knew what was going to happen. Marvin Vettori really helped us out. In fact, he took the exact logic we were using and said, I'm going to invest heavily in my wrestling in this fight. And, it worked. Go figure. Kevin Holland,
I will say, I am glad this fight made me laugh almost right from the beginning.
Did it?
It didn't make me laugh much as it went through. Like a minute in, when Holland kicked him in the nuts.
Oh, that was good. Yeah.
Vettori was going, right in the balls. Right in the balls, bro.
Is that what he was shouting?
Yeah, something along those lines.
They muted it on my broadcast.
Oh, let me see if I can find it. I'm going to give you a transcript.
It was almost funnier to have it muted. I wish instead of muting it.
No, it wasn't. This was very, very funny. I was laughing a lot.
I still though, yeah, I wish they'd done a long bleep and just let this angry Italian man shout while holding his crotch. That would have been good. Okay, what's the transcript?
Give me a second. Discuss this fight more whilst I'm searching for it.
All right. Well, Vettori really leaned on his wrestling. I mean, the first thing to say is simply that Kevin Holland is a bad wrestler. Like there's no way around that. Like I said with Robert Whittaker, there's just a certain point at which it's like, do you know the fundamental techniques? It's not a question of like, cause the people are now once again saying Kevin Holland needs to move down to 170. Why don't learn to wrestle first? Just get a fucking wrestling coach. I'm very confident that if Kevin Holland could muster the interest, and I think this may have something to do with it, based on my outsider view of Kevin Holland, if he could muster the interest to develop a wrestling game, he could do it very quickly. He is a talented, athletic person.
Didn't they say that he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt?
Kevin Holland?
Yeah.
He's something. He's trained with Travis Lutter, which is also, I think, part of the puzzle here. Somebody came to me on Twitter. I wish I'd gathered their name, but they said They trained at Luder's gym and left because this was part of the reason anyway. They didn't do any wrestling. And looking at...
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, most modern BJJ gyms you go to nowadays will give you the basics of wrestling. It's one of the first things you learn. They will, teach you single legs. They will teach you, like, body lock takedowns. They will... it is very rare that you just have a gym nowadays, which is just like, no, all we're going to do is just going to grapple on the floor.
Yeah. But Travis Lutter himself was never a very good wrestler.
Yes.
It's just out of curiosity, was just looking at Fight Metric. Not the most damning numbers in the world, but getting taken down by Trevor Prangley 5 times also isn't a great look. But
okay, so the transcript is, what the fuck? What the fuck, bro? It was right in the balls, bro. Right in the balls. He limped away.
It is very much the kind of thing Kevin Holland himself would say.
He just kept shouting, right in the balls, right in the balls, for like a solid 20 seconds.
It was 20 seconds of silence on my end of the ocean. It was, on the one hand, disappointing. On the other hand, it was funny to imagine what the stream of accented slurs might have been. On that note, this is not technical in the slightest. Kevin Holland also didn't seem to be having fun. It seemed like the worst of all worlds. Like, he didn't talk.
Yeah, I think
he didn't seem
there's only so many times you can have that fight
where you can lose the
unless you're an absolute insane person. Yeah.
Well,
before you can lose the joie de vivre.
Yeah, perhaps. So let's talk about developments. I mean, I do think they were saying all over the broadcast. Which, by the way, was way better just without Joe Rogan there. I can quite enjoy Daniel Cormier as a commentator, which I remember being my initial reaction to him joining the booth. I was like, man, he really brings some wrestling insight. You can feel his experience. He sort of like is often mentioning the sort of shape of the fight. He has a good perspective often on scorecards and everything. And he is just atrocious when Joe Rogan is around. And it occurred to me that literally everyone is worse when Joe Rogan is around. It's like he just brings his Yeah.
This is really true. I've never really thought of it like that.
Yeah,
because you're right. I was actually thinking, Daniel Cormier is doing a decent job. I mean, he's he's more humble when Joe Rogan isn't there. He's more likely to like talk up like the skills of the lower weight classes, or to say like, man, I could never do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think particularly he is one of those guys, like, he's contextually decent, but if you have something where there are a lot of wrestling details or criticisms to make, like there was in this one, he's genuinely,
he's great.
A pretty good guy to have in the booth, just talking about how, Vittori was changing the angle, and like, you could see that Holland was like putting his feet parallel, was putting his feet parallel to the fence, all that kind of stuff.
He was all over the key dynamic of the fight. He was very useful in the booth. And I find him interesting to talk to. He knows his shit, and he's got a strong dad energy. It's just good. When Joe Rogan's around, he just like brings his dumbass charisma, and then everyone just like spends the entire time trying to impress him. That's what it feels like.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah, they'll start broing out.
Yes. DC thinks he's doing a podcast. Paul Felder is like, he's the guy who meets a guy. Paul Felder, this is very funny. So you know how for martial arts, there's a type of guy who will hear that somebody like does karate and will immediately want to fight them.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Felder is that with comedians. He knows Joe Rogan's a comedian, so he's like, I'm going to make this guy laugh. Which is not me. I don't have any insight because I would never act like this, and I have never had that response to meeting someone I know to be funny. And then Dominic Cruz just argues with Joe Rogan. Everyone sucks with Rogan around. Anyway, why did I get onto this topic? DC was all over the wrestling problems that Kevin Holland was having. And like, it was just that simple. He just doesn't have the fucking fundamental wrestling techniques. He just doesn't do the right things. You know, like you can be out of position, you can be off balance, you can get hit by a good clean shot or whatever, but there's still a correct procedure of moves to make. And maybe they're not even the specific moves, but the specific concepts. Like, you don't have to all do it the same way, but you do have to break posture when a guy is trying to grab your leg and pick you up in the air. You know, or you have to do something to get your legs out of his grip. You have to do something. And Kevin Holland doesn't know how to do these things. He just doesn't know. So yeah. The other thing, Kevin Holland, that's why I brought it up. He just didn't have time, as DC said, since the Brunson fight. Like, it looked like he brought some new ideas in here, but it was too much too soon against somebody who was way too, smart, essentially, in just going for Kevin Holland's most glaring weakness. But he did bring some different tools. First of all, he was really rangy early. I actually liked this approach against a southpaw better than any counter southpaw striking I've ever seen from Holland in the past. A lot of kicks, as you said, including the very accurate dick kick right to the balls. Marvin Vettori was not wrong about that. But that movement and kicking was nice. He was timing his straight punches very well. It was a lot of straight punches, which were really, really working. Even late into the fight, he was cracking.
Yeah, I mean, he genuinely hurt.
Yeah.
Vettori on like a couple of occasions, probably about as badly as I've ever seen Vettori hurt.
Honestly, yeah. He cracked him like in round 5 with the only shot he landed in that round, but it was a huge straight right hand. Very nice. I also thought we saw some development out of, and again, this is of course the direction Holland is going to develop rather than investing in wrestling technique, which it doesn't seem like he even has a resource available to him for that right now. But he did seem to have an enhanced jiu-jitsu approach at first. Because the first time Vettori got him down, Holland had a really nice MMA guard going. He was creating space instantly. I think he worked like a knee shield in there, and then he got feet on hips. He kicked off. He was combining that with using his legs to threaten submissions. It was a really aggressive, space-making guard game, which I would love to see more of that out of Kevin Holland. You can have bad takedown defense if you're going to quickly kick everyone off of you when they get to top position.
I mean,
you certainly can.
I think you can have that as long as you. I mean, I've kind of said this before. You can have that as long as you have unlimited cardio.
That's what I was working towards as well. All of these adjustments were moot because Kevin Holland got tired after about 5 minutes at most. So yeah, I don't know. It didn't make me think. It wasn't a particularly meaningful fight to begin with, you know, like Kevin Holland was needed to fill.
Yeah, I mean, there's a solid chance that Holland has simply gone as far as he was going to. This is
sure.
Like him knocking out Jacare was incredibly unlikely. I mean, these two matchups have been particularly cruel. There are not many good wrestlers at 185, and I mean, debatably, he's pretty much fought. You know, who are the other ones that he could fight? Chris Weidman, Amari Akbadov, maybe Shoeface, maybe new Kelvin Gastelum, and maybe Jack Hermanson.
Sure. Yeah, I guess there's a decent number, I guess, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Which is not good news for Kevin Holland.
No.
But, you
Still
know.
wouldn't mind seeing him against Kelvin Gastelum, though. Be funny.
Yeah, that sounds great. I don't know. I didn't feel like this made me any more hopeless that Kevin Holland won't find another angle. It did seem to be frustrating, and maybe that's what he needs to make a change. But I think that's what's if we are ever going to see something different out of Kevin Holland from this, it'll need something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely someone who probably needed to lose, 10 straight rounds of wrestling. Before he tried to learn it. Yeah. So it's probably a good thing.
And even if he doesn't, again, who's to say if he had a full camp, he may have gotten 2 rounds of good guard work in there before he got tired.
Mm-hmm.
So even that did represent an improvement of some kind. It's something that if he's going to make the most of his time on the feet and crack you with devastating, accurate shots, he can probably beat a lot of people just with a slightly more prolonged version of the approach he showed here against Vettori.
Yeah, I mean, both Brunson and I mean, this one brought home to me that he really does, like, I think Holland really does hit quite hard.
Yeah,
and this might be one of the changes that I think we've seen in the UFC.
He was loading up too, and against Brunson when he had his moments, but it counts when he does. Absolutely. He really whips him in there. He's got a really snappy, like, ball on the end of a chain kind of power. All right.
Yep.
Well, that's that for the main event. Didn't learn anything new. A little bit, but it was more or less as expected. Now, why don't we take a break? When we come back, the co-main event, speaking of things that were unexpected, we will definitely have some things to say about that. Daniel Rodriguez having, speaking once again of things that were expected, the most predictable win over Mike Perry ever, and more after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
What do you say? Should we just plow through?
Give me 1 sec. I'm just gonna have my drink.
He's gonna have his drink. Son of a bitch. Son of a motherfucker.
All right. I'm ready to go.
Alrighty. Then welcome back to Heavy Hands, where we are talking still about UFC Vettori versus Holland. Moving on to the undercard now, the undercard at large. Phil, I think we called Arnold Allen versus Sadiq Youssef perfectly. you know, the dynamic where Sadiq Youssef is this, somewhat more patient and aggressive, sort of like one and done power puncher. And, Arnold Allen is this like grimy, high output, high movement fighter. That read held up very well. And if it's not clear, yeah. I'm being more sarcastic than I've ever been. In fact, it was somehow a complete bizarro world version of the fight we expected.
Yeah. In what world would Arnold Allen have been like the dynamic moments knockdown guy, and Sadiq Youssef have been the steady non-committal pressure guy?
Yeah.
This was a strange old fight.
It was. I think we hit on something, certainly. Often the easiest first level call to make about a fight is, how's this guy against southpaws? We were a little concerned. I think there's still reason, or I think this fight merited our concerns, really. Youssef just didn't seem all that comfortable. He's kind of just a right hand at the best at times. But, at that longer range enforced by the open stance, it seems less surprising, less effective. He just, for as much as he was the volume guy in this fight, he's just not much of a combination puncher. And, I think that bit him. The thing that this fight really made me think of, Phil, was development. Because the other major thing that I talked about, at least, last week, was level of competition. And I hit it again on the Vivi with that bastard Zane Simon. I was like, just compare these guys' levels of competition. It's a joke, Arnold Allen's level of competition compared to Sadiq Youssef's. And I want to pose to you this question. Is it possible that Arnold Allen benefited from a lower level of competition? Is it possible that he has become, as a result, a very comfortable, relaxed, and very well-rounded, adaptable fighter? Whereas Sadiq Yusuff, always fighting someone who might crush him at any moment, has just sort of been forced to rely on what he's already bringing to the table. This did not look like a stagnated Arnold Allen. It did feel like a stagnated Sadiq Yusuff, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think Allen has had, as I think I've mentioned, he's had a pretty perfect level of competition. Because as you can see, all his, as we talked about, I mean, all his fights have been reasonably competitive. Yes. He's won them all.
Yeah.
And also, despite being, competitive, a lot of them haven't really been that violent. There haven't been ones where he's been getting lit up and he's been getting knocked down. He's not having, Nathaniel Wood type, close competitive fights where they're high paced wars. It was mostly like he was getting edged in certain grappling exchanges, or he was eating counters, or, but they weren't fights which took away from him.
Right. So we talk so often about getting rounds in. He really has just literally gotten all the rounds in.
Yeah. And I think, and I said, before, when we saw his last, what was his last fight before this one?
It was Nick Lentz.
Nick Lentz. I think you saw how much more comfortable he was becoming in that fight, because Nick Lentz is a grimy, horrible person to fight.
Yeah.
And still, Allen pretty much just picked him off.
Yeah.
He was looking in a way which was he hadn't looked as comfortable in previous fights against less dangerous opposition. I know I'm saying Nick Lentz is dangerous, but he kind of is. He's dangerous in a kind of Drakkar close way, in that he will just force you into a horrible fight.
Yeah.
And then and then often beat you there. I mean, Nick Lentz is still someone, he might be half blind now, still someone who gave a very tough, third round to Chad Mendes, or who was, someone who finished, Will Brooks. He's not an easy guy to look good against.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I think that's absolutely right. I think, that Allen has had, almost the perfect level of competition to develop.
He essentially has had the track of, looking at it now, with Sadiq Yusuff being the capstone. It's hard to disagree with you, and it is kind of what we are constantly asking to see, in terms of actual fighter development and progression. This is a fighter whose record looks like he has been taken care of to yield the best result. And, that's how it felt. I mean, I'm honestly, in recollection, it feels like I talked you into picking Sadiq Yusuff last week, and you were...
I did not pick Sadiq Yusuff, I picked Arnold Allen.
Well done, thank you. You were correct, and my recollection then is that you just had a much better read on Arnold Allen. Your comparison to Rory McDonald, this guy looks like Rory McDonald. He's like the first TriStar guy since Rory, who seems to really make the most of that I can kind of do everything approach to fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And,
it's combining the I can do everything approach of TriStar with the I can do everything approach of British people in general.
Yeah, but it's it's more than just I have tools in every phase. It is an adaptability in approach as well. He can fight a back foot fight. He can pressure. He can do grimy clinch wrestling. There was quite a lot of that in this fight, which led to it being way more boring than I expected. We haven't mentioned that, but it wasn't a particularly exciting fight. It was kind of one of the worst fights to watch on the card.
I thought the first two rounds were really good, and then the third round was atrocious.
Grading on a curve here. This was a pretty damn entertaining card. There was some crazy.
The third round also felt like Rory McDonald.
Yes, he knew he had it in the bag.
It felt like Rory McDonald, Douglas Lima.
Yes.
It was like, oh, you're fighting a striker, and you got to neutralize him somehow. It's time to just desperation wrestle.
Yeah. there's always gonna be some ways to pick at the lack of depth in a well-rounded fighter like Allen or McDonald, but it shows intelligence. He's riding that line. Just it's like beforehand. I looked at him never quite dominating a fight, but never letting it slip out of his control as a negative. But sometimes that's a positive.
Yep. That's just how the UK does. Leon Edwards, he blazed the trail for every generic, middling pace, kind of good everywhere, and not bad everywhere guy. That's what the UK is going to produce from now on,
guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said this on Twitter. So, I mean, I think there's, as I said, first two rounds were very interesting because it did become a lot about like the Southpaw versus Orthodox like hand fight dynamic. I think Allen, as you sort of mentioned, he was more comfortable shifting back and forth between being someone who was just trying to set up his jab and someone who was fighting the real, who was fighting a southpaw the way an orthodox fighter tries to fight. Someone who was fighting an orthodox fighter the way orthodox fighters try to fight southpaws. So he would kind of mix up between tagging Yusuf with the jab and then between like hand fighting with the right hand and setting up the left and the high kick, which was basically what won him the second round. But in that second round, I think, you could see some of the problems with Allen is that he's probably just not physically all that impressive. And so when he really wanted to go to his wrestling, you could see he was just sort of tiring himself out on Yusuf.
Yeah. So actually the first time I can think of Allen looking kind of gassed by the end of a fight.
Yeah. And from Yusuf's perspective, you can see that I think one of the things that has really kept Yusuf alive in the UFC and kept that unbeaten streak going, particularly against Feely, was that he's just a really good natural grappler. He just really he has a knack for it. And we kind of called this out a bit in the preview. That I think he's just very good. He's just a very good natural wrestler and grappler. But I think the problem here was that in that third round, he couldn't turn it off. Like he's, because he has an instinctive feel for grappling, he'd been hurt twice at that stage. And, he might not have been thinking that clearly. But if he was someone like, I don't know, let's say Kevin Holland, but if he didn't have any the same kind of natural feel for grappling as I think he does, he would have disengaged from the grappling more. And I think Allen might have seriously been in trouble then.
Yeah.
But as it was, Yusuf just couldn't stop himself. Like you could clearly just see him go, oh, in the wrestling room now. And I think he was able to do that against Feely. And it was, something which without that, he might have lost that fight. But in this one, it sort of removed his last chance for winning.
Yeah. I still, though, I agree with that. I think he's maybe a bit of a Paul Felder. Yusuf. He just maybe.
Yes. That's a very good analog.
But I'm also just not convinced that even if he had kept it on the feet, he would have won. I think Allen.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm not. I think it still would have been a tough ask.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
It was his only chance to win.
I agree with that. Yes, Allen was having more trouble than previously in the fight. The thing, though, is that Allen just kind of found the right chinks in Yusuf's armor. Like I hate when people say this, but it felt a bit like someone being exposed. In that Yusuf was like just a right hand machine. Like when he was trying to hurt Allen, when he forgot about that and was moving and throwing kicks, that was all pretty nice. But when he started not like putting his shoulder into the right hand and he started like that was when Allen was like, oh no. Yeah, there was a moment at the start.
Allen was visibly worried, but then shortly afterwards he kicked him in the head.
Right. Yeah. At the start of round 2, Yusuf started to come up with some adjustments. He started to land those counters that I was really expecting to work for him. But I just think Allen, it just doesn't respond to Yusuf in the way Yusuf wants his opponents to respond to him. He's not a fearful fighter, and maybe he's there to counter because he comes onto that front foot, like I pointed out last week. But he also stays really tight defensively in that position, and he is always ready to recounter. He just doesn't give a shit about leaving his head in the pocket. He just figures, I'll keep a high guard, catch something on the elbows, and then I will fire back with weirdly close range, but still straight shots. He's just a difficult guy to overwhelm. And I think Yusuf is kind of, even against Gabriel Benitez, at least it was easy for him to get Benitez moving backwards.
Yeah.
Allen just like stood his ground when he needed to, and Yusuf ended up looking like he only had the one idea. On the feet anyway.
That is, I think, the difference between Allen and, like, say, Rory Mac, or at least certainly, modern Rory Mac, perhaps not when he was younger, is that he is, as I said, like, Allen is secretly, he's kind of an angry guy.
Yeah.
He will just jump in with combinations every now and again.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, it's just a tricky thing to deal with when you're fighting this against someone who's sniping at you constantly from the outside and then just like jumps in with a lead uppercut under your elbow into a left hook. Just disconcerting. A disconcerting person to fight against.
All right, what else from this? Mackenzie Dern and Nina Ansaroff?
Really, I was putting Dern down a lot in this fight. She showed me.
I don't know how much Dern is in this position where she is so highly skilled in one phase that all she really needs is like a tiny adjustment. I should say more than that. She's so well skilled in one phase. She also has a lot of the essential elements of an MMA fighter. She's fearless. She's durable. She seems to have respectable power. She likes to fight. Combine that with the overwhelming technical dominance in her specialty phase on the ground. All she really needs is to make a very tiny adjustment of one kind or another to seem to have progressed massively. And in this case, it was, literally any wrestling after the shot. That was all she needed. It was the reason that was the reason I think both of us picked Ansaroff, really, is that she only gets taken down when people can push through after the sprawl. And, Dern stayed on her leg and worked her down to the ground, and it was all Dern. And I think, do you have anything to add besides that?
No, that's pretty much it. I was just picking against her on the understanding that she wasn't going to do the wrestle and wasn't good at the wrestle, and she was. Yeah.
She was fine. She didn't have to be great. She just has to go for it and have more than one idea.
That was, I'm now more excited about Mackenzie Dern than I have been for a long time.
For sure. Yeah. And I did think Nina Ansaroff did look rusty. Ring rust is real. People who've been out of the cage, especially when heavy pressure is being put on them right from the get-go, Nina Ansaroff did not pull the trigger at all. Really, in this fight. So, it happens.
Yep, fair enough. I was also wrong on that, Ben.
Oh, did you say that she wasn't going to be rusty?
I said I wasn't. I didn't think she would.
Rusty, do you think she looked rusty?
Yes. Yeah. It's hard to say because she was almost immediately pushed into the fence and was just fighting punches and takedowns. Yeah, perhaps. She's always been a very calm fighter. Never been one with rock solid takedown defense, but has at least been someone who I think has good lateral movement and is hard to back into spots like that. So yeah, maybe.
All I'm saying is if you're fighting Mackenzie Dern, you should look from the first bell as if you are ready for a crazy person to come running at you, and she didn't look particularly ready for that.
Very fair.
So, what else we got here? Daniel Rodriguez beat the absolute shit out of Mike Perry. Phil, as you always do, explain this to me, you son of a bitch. All right? When there's an old fighter who desperately needs to be taken care of, you want to see them murdered. You would like to see their throat slit and their body dumped unceremoniously in a back alley. That's what you specifically ask for every time.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, when someone with, shall we say, a checkered past or a checkered present, like Michael Johnson or Mike Perry, loses in hilariously predictable fashion, you have sympathy. I saw you on Twitter. You're like, oh, I feel bad for Mike Perry. Why don't you enjoy this?
I don't believe that was my post.
I'm quote a direct quote. I feel bad for Mike Perry. Signed, Mike's biggest fan. That was what you said.
I don't believe it. I think what I said was, whenever Mike Perry does something awful, I find myself thinking, maybe I'll enjoy watching him get beaten up this time, but it's remarkable how fast the entertainment wanes. Like the third round of this fight, were you still enjoying Mike Perry getting horrendously beaten up?
Kinda.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, kinda. You know, I don't know. There's something kind of impressive about it. Like, he just loses the same. Every time he loses the exact same fight. He loses it brutally, even though he's still almost impossible to knock out. He just takes the cleanest, hardest shots over and over and over, and he's always just flummoxed. Afterward, I think the bewilderment is what tickles me, because he's always just like, man, that guy brought something.
How could I have seen this? How could I have seen this? How could I have seen this coming?
Yes. So I enjoy that aspect of it. Yes.
I do think Daniel Rodriguez looked good, although again, it's going to be one of these things where it's going to be very hard to extrapolate people looking good from their performances against Mike Perry.
Yes, but there's enough reason to believe Rodriguez has looked good, increasingly good since coming to the UFC. He looked like a brawler on the Contender Series, if that's what it was. Was it? Yeah, it was a Contender Series. And then Tim Means, he was like a little flummoxed and then found a nice counter. And every fight since then, like honestly,
apart from that god awful fight against Nicholas Dalby.
Yes, the wrestling will be the thing to watch out for. Although Perry,
I mean, the thing I was worried about was that if Rodriguez started clocking Perry and Perry just decided to back up, but that did happen, and Rodriguez still kept beating the shit out of him.
Yep.
So I think that hopefully, I mean, again, Perry is a blank canvas.
Yeah.
Rodriguez is learning to lead more effectively, because I think that was the problem with him that was the real like major level problem with him as a striker, was that he was very counter dependent.
Yeah.
I mean, and you know, maybe Mike Perry doesn't mean anything to look good against him, but at least Rodriguez got in rounds of initiating his own offense on someone and seeing that it could work.
Yes.
So hopefully he will be more aggressive in future. And that, yeah, like you said, like working the southpaw jab, like mixing up the 1-2 and the 3-2, like just genuinely looks very impressive. I mean, I was thinking, like, I think I might have mentioned, did I mention this last week? He really is, I think, he is the fighter that Mike Perry would actually want to be.
Yeah.
In terms of the way that he fights. And yeah, Perry for his part, look, absolutely god awful with the thing that he, I guess, has to do now, where he does one thing to remind you that he's still physically a very impressive, talented person, which was that insane slam, and then just looks like the worst fighter in the UFC. Other than that, dismal.
I do love that it's wrestling season. You know, Mike Perry is a wrestler now. That's what he does. He's now at the point where the only success he has in fights is in taking people down. Fantastic. Yes, I'm still enjoying the journey, Phil, and I won't be made to feel bad about it.
What vicious power puncher would you like to see Mike Perry fight next?
Good question.
Chaos Williams?
Ooh, that sounds good. That sounds great. Let me look at the rankings here. Let's see. They gotta come from the top 10. I mean, that's a given. No, he's way below the top 10 now, isn't he?
Unfortunately, Michelle Pereira would undoubtedly be an absolute stinker of a fight.
Yes. Yeah, that would be ugly.
Oh no.
They would wrestle each other the entire time. I don't know. Just anyone. They don't have to be even that hard a puncher. Just anyone who can like move and jab. Anyone who can like hit the body. Just anyone who could fight pretty well. I'd like to see Mike Perry fight all those guys. All right. Well, that is it for sure. For this week's Heavy Hands, make sure you check out the Patreon. I think we're going to get a little,
Connor. When are we doing the, Jake Paul versus Ben Askren breakdown?
Is that happening soon?
I think it might be this weekend. I'm not sure.
Is it really?
I think it might be, yeah.
Do you want to watch it and do a live commentary?
Oh, Jesus. Maybe.
No, you won't be awake, will you? I mean...
Yeah, no, I'm not. I'm not running my sleep for that trash.
Yeah, well...
But yeah, we're both picking Jake Paul, right?
Yes.
Although Ben Askren's sole chance is the funniest way of winning, and that he should just boxcar homer Jake Paul to a terrible, grinding, awful, like, decision loss where he gets very, very tired.
I want to see him come in here and just wrestle Jake Paul and get DQ'd. I think that would be the funniest thing. Ben Askren just doesn't... I mean,
the funniest thing would be him getting Jake Paul with the Masvidal flying knee, but I don't think we're going to get it.
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
And he did the miming the falling over and falling asleep thing afterwards. Mwah.
In a boxing match.
Yes, exactly.
He rushes out and knees Jake Paul. You are completely right. There are a wealth of funny outcomes possible for this shit show. I don't know. We'll talk about it next week. It snuck up on me. I don't know how an event so momentous managed to sneak under the radar, but we'll talk about it next week. Is that good enough for you, Phil?
It's going to have to be.
All right. Well, that's good enough for me, and I hope that's good enough for all you listening out there as well. And this has been it. Phil, anything to plug? I'm going to guess no.
Just on Twitter, I read a really interesting thread from @DownwardElbow about Arnold Allen versus Sadiq Youssef, where he goes into like a lot of the hand fighting tactics and so on. And I have retweeted it, and other people should also read it.
Cool. I haven't seen that yet. I will check that out. I don't have a damn thing to plug. I'm not writing anything that I'm aware of for Whitaker Gastelum. Although I assume I will be for the Usman Masvidal 2 card. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, Phil. In fact, I know I didn't. But something about Rose Namajunas. She is just quickly becoming one of my favorite fighters. And I don't know what it is. It's
yeah, what could it be?
It's an attitude kind of thing, you know? It just feels like
you
know?
Yeah, there's just like some belief in her that you just find very very attractive.
Something all my favorite fighters share, and she's quickly jumping to the top of the list. So I would love to see her and Joanna duke it out for the title of number one racist strawweight. That would be awesome. But we will be talking about that, and I'm sure I'll be writing an article about it. Weili versus Namajunas is certainly very interesting, and I will be looking forward to that. Hope you all will as well, or are as well. I don't know. It's one of my worst outros ever. I've been doing this show for like 6 years, and I'm just getting worse at it over time. But I hope you enjoyed the show anyway. Find Phil on Twitter @EvilGregJackson. Find me at Boxing Bush, BUSCH, of course. You know that already. And we'll talk to you next week. This has been Heavy Hands. Bye.